Now, I've said for some time that Kiwis get screwed by the big Aussie banks. And we do. This was revealed in the Commerce Commission's latest investigation, and the government has promised immediate action around this. But some things weren't covered in that report and that investigation, like international transactions. They remain one of the least transparent areas of banking. They impact all of us, all Kiwis who travel or send money overseas to loved ones or even shop online on global sites. If you shop on global sites, you all do this, not to mention the number of import and export businesses who pay high bank fees without even realising what hidden fees they're being charged. The Commerce Commission says that further investigation is needed, and I spoke recently to money transfer business Wise and asked their spokesperson, Jack Pinczewski, what's going on?
So what's happening is that international payments, every time you make an international money payment, there's a currency transaction, there's a currency conversion. And inside that currency conversion, you're getting an exchange rate, which is not the exchange rate you'd see on Google, but it's an exchange rate that'd be offered to you by your bank or your money transfer provider. And the costs, there's a fee associated with that. So, if you're getting a poor exchange rate, that's a type of fee, and it's not being illustrated to consumers in New Zealand. And as a consequence, New Zealanders are paying more every time they make a foreign currency transaction, every time they travel overseas, send money to their families, buy something from overseas online. They're getting slugged with a 3 to 5% additional cost, and we think that that's not on. That shouldn't happen.
And they won't know this, will they? Because they just, we're sort of sheep really, aren't we? We line up, we buy this stuff, we send money or whatever the exchange is, whatever the transaction is, and we just sort of blindly go about our business, not knowing this. So it needs to be up there in spotlights, doesn't it?
Well, it's interesting. So we did some surveys and we found that 57% of Kiwis think that their bank makes it easy to understand the cost of international payments. But only a quarter of New Zealanders are aware that foreign exchange payments have a markup on the exchange rate. So there's a difference between the belief and understanding of how these products are priced and the actual understanding about how these products are priced. So, 1 in 4 New Zealanders know that they've got to look out for a bad exchange rate, but, over 50% of New Zealanders think that their banks are making it easy for them. And these fees, like I said, they can account, for between 3 and 5% of the full transaction amount, which is pretty significant when you consider that there's hundreds of millions of dollars flowing every day across borders in and out of New Zealand.
So therefore, the banks are knowingly clipping a ticket to the point of, for them, it will make them millions of dollars. This is a transactional fee that will cost us millions, but it will make them millions of dollars. And it's allowed under law because there's no regulation limiting what they're doing.
Well, yeah, you'd say that there's an economic rent here. That's what the economists would call it. It's a fee, it's a cost, it's a charge that's baked into a transaction. And it really isn't fair on consumers if you contemplate the fact that if they knew the costs of these sorts of things, they would be competing, going between providers, trying to find the best possible deal. So our contention is if you start illustrating to consumers the costs of these payments in dollar amounts, then you're going to start seeing people move between providers, finding cheaper ways to send money overseas.
You would like more clarity then? You'd like more, I suppose, some clarity around this, or at least the banks forced to front with their rates and what sort of best rates are, or how do you do it?
Any competitive market requires the costs and the prices of products to be disclosed. You wouldn't go into a supermarket and buy some milk if you didn't know the cost of the milk. You'd want to see that there's a price on it, that you can make an assessment as to whether or not you think that's a good deal. And if you don't think it's a good deal, then you can go to another supermarket and buy milk cheaper, hopefully. So what we're asking for is fundamentally the same thing. We're asking that the prices for these transactions be made clear to consumers upfront at the point of transaction, so that a New Zealander can take a look at it, think of themselves, this doesn't seem like a good deal, and then more easily make comparisons between different providers and different banks.
You're asking for transparency, aren't you? You're asking for transparency and clarity and so some vision, so New Zealanders see this with their eyes wide open.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're asking for. Transparency in pricing for foreign currency exchange.
Right. If I'm sending $1,000 to my mate in Samoa, what would I pay on that as a fee with the banks?
It would depend, and it would depend based on the way in which you've paid the money into the bank. So if it's cash, it's more expensive. It's also more expensive if it's paid in cash out at the other end. If you're doing it by bank transfer, it's slightly cheaper, but it can be anywhere between 3% and up to 10% in some cases, sending it to places in the Pacific. This is a serious issue for Pacifica. The ability to send money back home is a very important thing, particularly in places like Australia and New Zealand, where there are large communities of migrant workers who are here to send money back home to their families. And the fact that they're getting their ticket clipped potentially up to 10% on every transaction, it's worrying. And, there needs to be some mechanism to ensure that competitive tension brings these costs down.
It seems ridiculous that of $1,000, $100 could go in fees and associated costs to get the money to your mate at the end of the line, and all you're doing is transferring $1,000. Now, what should it be? What sort of fair and reasonable? Because I suppose any law change or regulation would include something along the lines of fair and reasonable. So, what would a fair and reasonable fee be for that sort of transaction?
Duncan, I'll just be clear. We're not asking for government or anyone to set prices or set floor prices or ceiling prices on these products. We're just saying that the best thing to do is to make these prices transparent. But in respect of how we price our products, it does depend on which route you're sending money to. And as I said, it does depend on the mechanism in which you pay in the money and pay out the money. But I can give you an example. Wise globally has about 0.67% average fee across about 1,200 currency pairs, so 1,200 different currency routes. This is obviously currency routes that are very highly trafficked. So, between New Zealand and Australia, or Australia and British pound, it is more expensive when you start looking at more exotic currencies. And there are a variety of reasons for that. But it really shouldn't be as expensive as being charged by traditional money transfer providers.
What's your take on this in terms of overall how much money New Zealand is losing as a result of this every year? Like, is it a giant rip-off? Is it a small rip-off? What's the sort of number you'd put on it?
It's not insubstantial. We're actually in the process of trying to find the total size of this market. As I said, it's a market which doesn't have a central exchange like a stock exchange. It's an over-the-counter market. So we don't know exactly the size of it, but there are hundreds of millions of dollars every day moving across borders. And a lot of that money is being sent by individuals, by small businesses. And, if you're contemplating what this looks like over the course of a year, it's many millions of dollars, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars to New Zealand consumers, small businesses, remitters, and travelers, people traveling overseas.
That we are unnecessarily paying, so we don't need to pay this. Exactly. If there was more regulation, more transparency, and more options, then we wouldn't be paying them because we'd be aware of it. This is an awareness issue too, isn't it?
It is in a way, and it's one of those things that if you said, well, why aren't people just educating themselves better? Well, what other market do you have where the price of a product is not illustrated to a customer up front? I can't think of a single one. If you think about the way you buy petrol, well, you see the sign of the petrol station. It tells you what you're paying.
Yeah.
The equivalent to this is you have to drive up to the Bowser, fill your car up, and then go into the shop, and then they'll tell you how much you paid in petrol.
It's a hidden and secret fraud in many ways. It's the hidden theft in the night.
Those are your words. I would say that it's a lack of competition leading to poor customer outcomes. And frankly, it's one of those hidden fees which is pernicious and people don't think about. And, this hidden margin pricing strategy, it really should go the way of the dodo.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey, we'll leave it there, Jack. I appreciate your time. Well said, nice and clear.
I appreciate it, Duncan.
Okay.
Thanks so much for your
Take
time
care.
and thanks for your
Cheers.
listeners.
Thanks, mate.
Duncan Garner.